people have always said that God has this master plan in your life. And I go, if he would have told me the plan, I think I would have either screwed it up or messed up somewhere in the process of it. I am convinced that there's never been a master plan, but I've always believed that the master has had a plan. He just didn't share it with me.
Hello and welcome back to The Uncomfortable Truth. We've got a special guest today. This is a guy that I've known for a long time. I actually worked for him for a while. My wife worked for you and your organizations for a while. And you've helped a lot of kids. We had Blake Nelson on the show a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And Blake is the helps run Heartlight Ministries. Mark Gregston on the show today. We appreciate you being here, Mark.
Oh, it's great to be here.
It's good to have you.
Be here.
It's good to see your face. It's gotten a little bit older since the last time I've seen you.
Oh, for Pete's sakes, don't. I've been saying that this year is a year of stitches and staples, and so
you've had some of that going on.
I've had a lot of that going on, and it's just that time in life that you're cutting things and burning things off, and now I get my kidneys removed in a couple of weeks. And
That's an interesting story we probably need to dive into in a minute, and like how you feel about that. But first, we're going to talk about how an old, grumpy man with a Sam Elliott mustache has so much experience with youth, with kids. Tell us about your journey and Heartlight. If you don't know about Heartlight, Blake talked a lot about it on the show that he was on.
Yeah.
But tell us about your journey and starting that, being the founder of that, and how all that evolved and came about.
When I was 19, I'd just come back I swam at the University of Arkansas, left, went to Oklahoma State, came back to Tulsa University. My wife, we dated since ninth grade. Wife Jan. Our first date was a Led Zeppelin.
Man, she's been putting up with you for a long time.
A long time. It's 50 years. And so, but our first date was a Led Zeppelin concert with this Christian band that came through.
I remember.
Tulsa.
Yeah, I don't remember. My great grandparents told me about them.
I'm sure they did. They may have been there.
I'm going to have to ease up on the old jokes. You might jump across the table here in a minute.
But Jan and I had been dating forever, and somebody came up to us and said, "Would you like to lead a Young Life Club?" And that's how it started. And I looked at Jan, and we weren't married yet, and I just went, why don't we do that? And so we started doing this Young Life thing. Young Life is an outreach to kids, and you have clubs and Bible studies, and but it's a non-denominational thing. And so the third club meeting we had 400 kids show up.
Nice.
Which is crazy. And this man walked up to me and said, was picking up his son. He goes, "I'm struggling with my son." And he goes, "What should I do?" And I looked at him and I'm going, I have no idea.
How old were you at
I was
that time?
19.
19.
I was 19.
Okay.
And I blurted out, "Well, why don't you let him come live with me?" And that's how it all started.
One statement.
And so he lived with me, and then somebody else heard that you can live with Mark, and did that. And then Jan and I get married, and then people would say, "I'm struggling with my daughter." They would come live with us.
Okay.
I continued to go to school and work at a church. Worked at a church for 7 years, but my heart was always with kids that were struggling. And so we moved to Branson, Missouri, to a Christian sports camp, and they had kids there that were struggling as well. So we started a program. I got fired from that program because I think you're supposed to do things legally instead of illegally, and so I got fired. And a man called me and said, "I've got a piece of property in Hallsville, Texas." I said, "Where's that?" He goes, "Well, it's right next to Longview." I said, "Well, where's that?" And 2 hours east of Dallas. And so I got in our little Astro van, and I drove down here crying the whole way. Because,
you did?
Yeah, I drove down here, and I walked on that property, and I thought, this is it. This is where God wants us to start another program.
How was Jan during that process of picking up everything?
Oh, it was horrible.
Okay.
It was horrible because the transition was we were kind of shunned from a group of people, and I mean, we were on our own, and we didn't know anybody in Texas, even though I was born here. We didn't know anybody, and it was just difficult. It was hard. And so then we started letting people know about what we were doing. and they started flocking around us, and it was somewhat amazing. But we really didn't know anybody
Yes.
in the area when we got here, so it was lonely. There were feelings of I was still fighting the depression of being fired from a job. That was a tough thing for me.
How long were you there?
I was in Branson for 7 years.
Okay. So at this point, you were 26, 27, 28?
Yeah, I'm 27.
Somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just thought, well, this is, I'm sorry, I was 33.
Okay.
I was 33, and we moved there when I was 27. And I thought this was where I'm going to be forever.
So walk back on that process. I want to go back to 19 years old when Dad says, my kid's struggling. And you said, was it a boy? Mm-hmm. Let him live with us. How did that transpire in your mind to where that was your reaction of this kid's struggling? Let him live with us. Why was that your first reaction?
Yeah, because I didn't know what to. I didn't know what to offer him, and I think that's been some of my motivation ever since then, is that there aren't a whole lot of places when parents are struggling and they don't know what to do and they feel like their child's going to die. They feel like their child's not going to be around in 6 months, that they're at wit's end, that their marriage is going to fall apart if they don't do something. And it's almost like there's no hospital for them to go to. There's no place of respite for them to go to. There's no vacation that can solve this issue. That child needs to leave home. Parents need to be restructured. And I sat there and I thought, we've got to help these parents as well. And that just came at that time.
Okay.
And people said, well, it's almost like, God was, I go, you know what? People have always said that God has this master plan in your life. And I go, if he would have told me the plan, I think I would have either screwed it up or messed up somewhere in the process of it. I am convinced that there's never been a master plan, but I've always believed that the master has had a plan. He just didn't share it with me.
I think if we knew that, like you're saying, if we knew those plans, we might mess it up. We might go a different direction. We might decide that we don't want to do it. God gives us what we can handle at the time, right? Because at 19, 19 and however many years later, over 3,000 kids have come through Heartlight. Yeah. That's a big ask for a 19-year-old.
It is, and this is what I've always gone back to, and I'm one of those guys that I really believe so many things, but I don't have to understand it to embrace it. And the scripture that says that my plans are not your plans, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. And it's interesting to me that he didn't share with me the plan, but he had a plan, but he just didn't share it with me. And so just that guidance, that feeling, whether that be the Holy Spirit or scripture that touches me in some way, that says, go this direction or do this or make this decision or whatever, that could be God's plan being fleshed out. When somebody else is sharing stuff with me, I believe that everybody that I meet has a message from God for me in some way. There's something for me to learn. Every punk kid that lives with us, God has placed them in our life to teach me something.
What's the biggest lesson that you've ever learned from a kid that's come on property and live with you guys?
Yeah.
Like slap you in the face.
Yeah, there was a girl that her name was Bree, from Eugene, Oregon, and she and I were kind of having it out, and I just said, you sweetheart, nobody really likes you. Nobody enjoys being in your presence. You're so angry. You're the angriest person I've ever met in my life, and it was pouring down rain. I mean, it was like this Texas gully washer, real frog choker of a rain and lightning and everything else coming down. And we were standing by a door, and she was cussing at me and yelling and screaming, and she wanted to walk away from me. And we walked out in the rain. We're standing in the parking lot of our office building. And I said, Bree, why don't you tell me what you want? Tell me what you want. And she said this. She said, I want you to love me the most when I deserve it the least. And it's been the greatest lesson I have ever learned from a kid. That this little punk, smart aleck girl that God was using to touch my heart. And that must have been 20 years ago. I think of that girl all the time. I think of that when I get upset at kids. I think about that when things aren't going right. I go, God, we've got to love these kids and show them the character of God and the love of God to touch their heart in some way. And that doesn't have to be by words. I think it's more by actions. But that's probably the greatest lesson I've ever learned from.
Man, that's huge. Is like when we're at odds end with our kids and they're yelling at us and we're yelling at them. We all have those moments to where we escalate when they escalate, and we don't know how to get it back. There's a lot of damage that can happen during those moments, but they are still God's children, just like we are still God's children, and we don't deserve His love. That's why Christ died for us. And to hold up in that moment and de-escalate, and you're right, I love you.
It's important. You know, and I think the other part, Shane, is that anger is an emotional response to not getting what you want. And so whenever a child is angry, whenever we're angry, it's because we're not getting what we want. They're not getting what they want. And that's why I always go back and say, what do you want? You know, and go back to the core of that's creating this sense of anger. This little girl knocked me off my rear. I mean, because somebody finally asked her what she wanted. I mean, her dad, you know, bless her heart. I mean, she was adopted. Her dad was in a wheelchair. She hasn't had a good life. All those things, and she's felt like a reject. She's felt like nobody cares for her. She's angry because she's not getting what she wants out of life. She thinks it's unfair. And then she stops me in my tracks with a comment. I want you to love me when I deserve it the least. And quite honestly, that's exactly what God does to every one of us. You know, in spite of how miserable and pathetic we are, He still loves us.
So how often is a kid, that's profound. That's very profound. How often is a teenager able to quantify something like that in their life? When you say, what do you want?
Yeah.
Like half the time, I don't know what I want. When you ask a kid that, like how are you guys helping them get to a point where they can actually, these feelings that they have inside, like can I describe them? Can I get them out of my mouth, or do I just know how to be angry?
Well, I think that's where you help a child go through that. I mean, I am so busy all the time. I never stop with a sense of wonder, where I just sit down and stop and think through things, where I'm going, why do I do that? Why do I respond that way? What is it about me? Instead of always thinking that it's about a kid, I tell parents all the time, ask yourself the question first. What is it about you that's causing you to get upset? Then what is it about the structure of your home? Then what is it about your kid? Before you look at the speck in somebody else's eye,
right,
look at your own. And so it just means, but I know that I'm so stinking busy all the time and always doing stuff. I don't take time to slow down and stop and think about those things. And I think that is one of the first steps in the pursuit of wisdom, to figure out, what is it about me? That's the only person I can change in this world, is me.
I feel like this is a common thing across our nation. Why do you feel like we are so busy, or we've allowed ourselves to be so busy and distracted that we don't stop? Most people don't. Why do you think that is?
I think we get value from it. I know I do.
What do you mean by that?
I do. You know, I mean, I didn't have a relationship with my dad. I didn't, you know, and if you worked hard, then you're a good man. You're strong like bull, you know, and you think that you're just something else. And so my deal was make money, mow yards, throw papers. People don't even know what throwing papers is anymore.
You're a paper boy.
That's right. You know, and all these.
Did you have a little bell on your?
No,
on your
I didn't have a
bicycle?
little dinger, but I noticed you had one on yours, and
so I wrote it over here today.
Yeah, and you know, so and when I made money, then people responded and reacted and loved me for
like
that.
You got value.
Yeah.
You got appreciation and love from others for the things that you did, not necessarily who you were.
Absolutely. I mean, because I sure didn't get it from my dad. Same way in swimming. I swam competitively for 13 years, and those medals meant all the world to me. They meant, I went, God, when I got those medals, when I got all that recognition, it was saying to me, you were valuable. Now, it was interesting, that same first year that we started a Young Life Club, 2 months before that, we lost our home in a tornado, and I lost all those medals. And it was the best thing for me. It was the best thing to realize that this isn't who you are anymore. You're not a swimmer anymore. And so let's figure out who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. And so it to me, it all kind of, did God send that tornado? I don't know, but it happened at the perfect time. You know, and I look at that and I go, when you sit down and start thinking about God's hand in your life, you begin to see a pattern, and what I saw were things in my life that I needed to deal with. And one was value. One was a sense of how I found acceptance by other people. One was I wasn't competing with everybody. I always thought I was competing against everybody all the time. And so I had to win, and they were the bad guys. And at some point I had to say, you know, that's not how life is supposed to be lived. That's not what God wants for us. I need to be spending more time helping other people and doing other things for them. So it started early on, but as I've gotten older and as you've made the rude comments about me being so old.
I'm so ugly.
You know. And, you know, I mean, as that has happened, I've seen the difference and how I wish I would have had the same attitude, you know, when I was in my 30s that I have now. Because I would tolerate more. I would know what's important, what's not. I would know what I need to be doing. I would lose some battles to win the war, those kind of things.
I've recently asked you how your perspective has changed as you've aged. I think I'm talking to our listeners out here or our viewers. I think we sometimes naturally discount people as they get older, and I think that's a load of bullcrap. I think we can glean from their wisdom and their life experiences because perspective changes. Right now, I'm in the middle of all my kids being involved in something, trying to start another business, doing a podcast, having 3 other businesses. I'm so busy, like you said, it's rare that I have the ability or the time to take and just stop and think about the things that I'm doing. What are some of the biggest lessons that you're learning through your life and looking back and evaluating your life and how you've gone through things and reacted and acted to things that you would tell the younger listener right now, whether it be how they raise their kids or just how they live their life?
You know, I think the first thing, for somebody like me, I was told a long time ago by the fellow that started Silver Dollar City up in Branson, Missouri. He goes, I doubt that you're ever going to get bored in your life. But he goes, the flip side of that is you're so busy, you've got to stop. My wife's dad, who's 95 years old, just told me the other day, I called him on his birthday, and he said, I want you to know that you were the hardest working man I've ever met in my life.
I want to pause you right there. How did that make you feel?
Well, excited and embarrassed at the same time.
Oh, that's a slap in my face.
It was, because there was a part of me that thought, I am a hard worker, and I like that. If I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm creative. I'm all those things. But sometimes I have been so busy, I've ignored the most important things in life, and that may be the value of relationships with other people, my own family at times. When we started Heartlight, I mean, I ignored my family.
It's a ton of work to start anything.
It is.
Especially a business like that where you're trying to build cabins, you're trying to build out offices, you're trying to get kids, you're trying to market it.
Oh, everything.
I mean, all of it based on I want to help families.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a massive amount of work.
It is, and every business guy out there knows exactly what we're talking about because they're doing the same thing.
Right.
It's a creative entrepreneurship that just drives you. I mean, I can't wait to get up in the morning. I can't wait for the next project. I'm always coming up with...
You still feel that way?
Oh, yeah.
Just takes longer for you to crawl out of bed?
Yeah, whatever. Whatever.
Listen, I'm getting to that point where I wake up and my right foot's been hurting for 3 months. I'm like, oh, crap, here we go. Something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It's a little... You slow down a little bit. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm having my kidneys removed, and I'm getting a new kidney in a couple of weeks. And you know what bothers me the most about all that? I'm most grateful. My son is donating a kidney.
Thank you, by the way, for doing that.
Yeah,
it's a big
huge.
Deal. It's a big deal.
Because I told him I was going to cut him out of the will if he didn't.
That the doctors asked him a million questions about that.
They did. They said, "Are you getting money for this?" And
inadvertently.
And I said, "Well, no. You're not getting it if
He's
you
just
don't."
Joking.
Give me a kidney. Give me a kidney.
He's joking.
But it is interesting. What scares me the most about it? What am I going to do during all this recoup time?
How much time is it?
I got to spend 6 weeks in Dallas and on follow-up 2 or 3, meetings with docs a week. And they say if you got to stay in Dallas, if you live outside of 50 miles of Dallas, then you have to stay in Dallas. So we've rented a place
for 6 weeks.
Yeah. And then it's, there's a regimen that you have to go through of pills and all the other stuff. But I'm not used to slowing down. And so I'm kind of excited about seeing what that's going to be like.
Are you doing anything to mentally prepare for that? You've been running and gunning your whole life.
I am. I'm in the process of writing 3 books. And I'm always coming up with new ideas. How do we do the next thing? And so there's going to be a lot of time to sit and just be reflective more than anything else. And that's really, Shane, that's when I started. When I was 50, somebody asked me to write a book. And I said, I don't know whether I can do that or not. And it forced me to sit down and start looking at things. And the first chapter that I ever wrote was the hardest because I've never thought in terms of wisdom, the wisdom that I've gathered through life, or the stories that I've really experienced and merging those two things together and coming out with a lesson for some. I've been so busy doing everything else.
So somebody said you should write a book, but the action of that, when you actually said, I'm going to sit down and write a book, the transition there, what caused you to take that advice and then put it into action? What was going through your head at that point?
It was the hardest thing, probably the hardest thing in my life. What changed was that he said, I want you to write the book to me. I'm going through a divorce. This was a publisher.
Okay.
And my daughter hates me. Now write that book and speak to me. And he goes, I want people to know you at the end of that book, and I want you to make them feel. And so I wrote, and it took me a while to write. Then I gave him a copy, for them to edit. And he goes, Mark, I don't think we want to know this much about you. But it became a very reflective time of just thinking through. And it forced me to sit down and just think through things. And that's, so here we are 20-some books later. I mean, I've had that time to think through, what have I learned? Mm-hmm. What has God been teaching me that I never knew or never spent time with? And so that has been a new thing for me. And so I look forward to the opportunity to do that. I'm writing a few books and doing it with a couple of other people that are on our staff.
Sounds like you're going to have time.
Well, yeah, I think I will. So.
All right, we're going to end this show right here, Mark. I appreciate you being here. We're going to jump back in next episode with Mark, maybe talking about time and being more reflective, or maybe we'll jump into talking more about kids. What we want to do is to make sure that we pull as much of that experience out of your brain as possible to help other people, like an information suck. We appreciate you being here. Go to parentingtodaysteens.org or heartlightministries.org. Parenting Today's Teens. If you're struggling with your kid, but you're not to the point where you're too far, where they're too far gone, you can start rebuilding that relationship. There's good resources there to help you do that. Heartlightministries.org if you think you're at the end of your rope. call them to see if that's a possible area of help. We appreciate you being here again. Go kick the day in the face, and we'll catch you on the next one.